Help her find something to do. She looks lost." My uncle said it loud enough for the whole table to hear. He was laughing when he said it. So was my cousin. So was half the room. I was standing right there. I had driven 4 hours to be at that dinner. 4 hours through rain and highway construction and a gas station burrito that I regretted by mile 40. I showed up in a plain black dress because I didn't want to make it weird. I left my ID in the car for the same reason. I just wanted one normal Thanksgiving, one dinner, where nobody asked me what I actually did for a living, because the last time I told the truth, it made things worse, not better. That was 2 years ago. My uncle hadn't forgotten. Apparently. His name is Gerald. He's my mother's older brother, and he has the particular energy of a man who peaked in his early 40s and has spent every year since reminding everyone around him of that fact. He sold insurance for 30 years. Did well enough to buy a lake house. Talks about it constantly. He coaches youth football on weekends, not because he loves children, but because he loves having a whistle around his neck. He is, in the most precise use of the phrase, a lot. My name is Sloan. I'm 31. And I am, by most measurable standards, invisible at family gatherings. I don't talk about my job. I don't bring it up. I don't hint at it. I don't leave paperwork lying around. It's not modesty. It's self-preservation. The first time I mentioned where I worked, my aunt asked if I was a secretary. The second time, my cousin Victor asked if I had a gun, then laughed before I could answer. After that, I learned to say, government work, and changed the subject. The problem with government work is that it sounds like nothing. It sounds like a woman with a badge lanyard and a Tupperware lunch, sitting in a gray cubicle somewhere processing forms. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's exactly what I want people to think. It mostly works. Except with Gerald. Gerald decided somewhere around my 28th birthday that I was the family disappointment. I'm not sure exactly when the decision was made, but it solidified around the time my cousin Becca got her real estate license and my cousin Victor made partner at his firm, and I showed up to Christmas with no husband, no promotion announcement, and no story to tell. Gerald patted my shoulder at that dinner and said, "Don't worry, kiddo. Some people just take longer to find their lane." I smiled. I said thank you. I drove home and did not think about it again for approximately 6 minutes. So, Thanksgiving, this year, my mother had called me 3 times in October to make sure I was coming. Her voice had that particular tightness she gets when she's trying to sound casual about something she cares deeply about. "It would just mean a lot to Grandma Paulette," she said. "She's been asking about you." I said I'd be there. I cleared my schedule, which is not a small thing to say, and leave it that. But I left it at that, and I drove 4 hours in the rain. Gerald arrived before I did. He was already holding court by the time I walked through the front door of my grandmother's house. He had a drink. Scotch, I assumed. Gerald always has scotch at family events, like he saw someone do it in a movie once. And he was telling a story about a client who tried to lowball him on a renewal policy. My Uncle Victor was nodding along. My Aunt Renee was laughing at the right moments. My grandmother was in the kitchen, and the whole living room smelled like turkey and wood smoke, and the specific kind of tension that only exists when a large family has agreed, mutually and silently, to be on their best behavior. I hugged my grandmother first. She held my face in both hands the way she always does and looked at me for a long moment without saying anything, just looking, and then she said, "You look tired." I told her I had driven through rain. She told me to eat something before dinner even started. I did. I was making a plate of crackers and cheese in the kitchen when Gerald found me. "There she is," he said, in the voice he uses when he's performing warmth for an audience that isn't there. He held out his arms. I let him hug me. He smelled like scotch. 4 years of college, 2 degrees, and you're still doing the government mystery thing? Good to see you too, Gerald. I'm just saying. He reached past me for a piece of cheese, uninvited. Your mother worries. We all worry. There's no shame in a regular job, you know. Benefits. Stability. Becca's been killing it in real estate. You two should talk. She could probably get you in. I have a job, I said. Right, the government thing. He made a vague gesture with his hand like he was trying to wave away a smell. What exactly do you do again? You always say analyst, but that's not really an answer. It's a pretty complete answer, actually. He laughed. Not a mean laugh. Gerald's laughs are never mean. They're always jovial, which is somehow worse. You're so mysterious, Sloane. Always have been. He pointed at me with his cheese. You know what I think? I think you process data in a building somewhere and you've convinced yourself it's classified. He said the last word in a stage whisper, eyebrows up. Am I close? I looked at him for a moment. Not even a little, I said. He laughed again and walked back into the living room. That was the overture. Dinner was the main event. There were 14 people at the table this year. My grandmother at the head, my mother and her husband on one side, Gerald and his wife Carol on the other, their kids, Victor, Becca, and Becca's new boyfriend, whose name I could not retain no matter how many times I heard it, my Aunt Patricia and her husband Dale, their daughter Nora, who is 17 and the only person at the table I consistently enjoy talking to, and me, seated as always at the far corner near the window, which in a normal family might feel like exile, but which I have come to understand is actually a gift. Dinner started fine. The turkey was good. My grandmother had made the cranberry sauce from scratch, which she does every year and which I have never successfully replicated, no matter how many times I've asked for the recipe. The conversation stayed on safe topics. Sports, real estate, Becca's new car, then Gerald refilled his scotch. He didn't put ice in it, which meant he was taking it seriously. I noticed this and made a small internal note. So, he said, and the word landed on the table with the particular weight of a man who has been waiting to say something for a while. I ran into Mitchell Greer this week. You remember Mitchell, Carol. He's the one who does the federal consulting. Used to work for HHS. He looked down the table at me. Sloane. Mitchell says the agency work these days is mostly contracted out. Most of the actual analysts are contractors, not direct staff. They don't get the pension. They don't get the benefits. They're basically just, Gerald, my mother said. I'm just sharing what Mitchell said. It's relevant. He was still looking at me. Is that what you are? A contractor? I'm a federal employee, I said. Okay. He said it like he didn't believe me. What agency? I picked up my water glass. You know I can't say that. Right. He smiled. Not at me, at the table. She can't say. He said it lightly like it was a bit we'd worked out together, like I was in on the joke. My niece, 31 years old, works for a mystery agency she can't name, doing mystery work she can't describe, and every Thanksgiving she shows up and we're all just supposed to accept the bit. He spread his hands. I accept the bit, Sloane. Help me out. Help her find something to do. She looks lost. That last part was directed at the table. He was laughing when he said it. So was Victor. So was Becca's boyfriend, who didn't even know me. I looked at my grandmother. She was looking at her plate. My mother had a fixed smile on her face that I recognized as the expression she wears when she is actively choosing not to start a fight. Nora, across the table, was looking at me with an expression that on a 17-year-old reads as, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. I cut a piece of turkey. I put it in my mouth. I chewed. I did not say anything. Gerald moved on to other topics. The lake house. A neighbor dispute about a fence line. Whether the Cowboys had a real shot this season. I ate my dinner, and I contributed exactly nothing to any of these conversations, and I watched the candles burn down in the center of the table, and I thought about how far I had driven in the rain to sit in this chair. After dinner, I helped my grandmother clear the table. She didn't say anything about what happened. She doesn't engage with Gerald's bits, hasn't for decades. She handed me a dish towel and we stood at the sink together, and she told me about a book she'd been reading, some thriller about a woman who fakes her own death and starts over in Portugal. Very satisfying, my grandmother said. I told her it sounded good. She said, I'll leave it for you on the counter. I folded the dish towel when we were done. I kissed my grandmother on the cheek. I went to get my coat. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I looked at it in the hallway, half in and half out of my coat, and the name on the screen made me stop moving for a moment. It was my director. I have 2 directors, technically, depending on the operation. But this was the one whose calls you answer immediately regardless of what you're doing, regardless of where you are, regardless of the fact that you are standing in your grandmother's hallway with stuffing still in your stomach and your uncle's laughter still faintly in your ears. I stepped outside onto the porch. The rain had stopped. The air smelled like wet leaves and cold pavement. Keating, I said. Sloane. His voice was even, which meant it was serious. My director only sounds even when things are actually serious. When things are routine, he sounds mildly annoyed. I need you back in the city tonight. We've had a development on the Meridian case. Meridian. 18 months. My case. My lead. I'll leave in 20 minutes, I said. Make it 15. I went back inside. Got my bag from the guest room. Went to find my mother. She was in the kitchen with my grandmother and Carol. I told her something had come up with work. I had to go back tonight. I was sorry. My mother's face did the thing it does. That complicated mixture of worry and something like pride she's never quite figured out how to express. She hugged me. She told me to drive safe. She handed me a container of leftover cranberry sauce. I was pulling on my coat in the hallway when Gerald appeared. Leaving already? He had his scotch again. No ice, still. Didn't even make it to pie. Work thing, I said. Ah. He nodded in that way he has, the slow knowing nod. The mystery job calls. Yep. Well. He raised his glass in a small toast. Good luck with the data entry. I looked at him for 1 second. Just one. Thanks, Gerald, I said. Enjoy the pie. I drove back in the dark. No rain this time, just clear, cold highway and the kind of quiet that settles into a car after a long day. I drank gas station coffee. I listened to nothing. I thought about the Meridian case. The development my director mentioned turned out to be significant. I won't detail the specifics. Not because I'm being dramatic about it, but genuinely because I can't. And if you've read this far, you've probably figured out that when I say that I mean it. What I can say is that the Meridian case had been the most complex financial intelligence operation my division had run in 4 years. It involved 3 shell companies, 2 foreign intermediaries, and an amount of money that would make most people's vision go briefly white if they saw the number. It had taken my team a 1.5 years to build, and the development my director called me back for was the kind that meant it was almost ready to close. My title is Senior Intelligence Analyst. I work for a federal agency that falls under the Treasury Department. I lead a team of 7. I have a security clearance that requires a yearly review. I travel, sometimes, to places I don't tell my family about. I have spent the better part of the last 3 years working on a single case that I believe, genuinely and without theater, matters, in the way that a certain kind of work matters, quietly, without acknowledgement, without a press release, without anyone at a Thanksgiving table ever knowing it happened. I'm not telling you this to be impressive. I'm telling you because of what happened in February. February is not a month that usually means anything to me. It's cold in the city in February, and gray. And the particular gray of a federal building in February is a thing unto itself. I had been back in the office for 2 months after the Meridian case wrapped. I was starting a new assignment. My team had expanded to 9. Things were quiet in the way that good work is quiet. No drama. Just early mornings and careful reading and the satisfaction of finding the thread in something that other people couldn't follow. I had forgotten entirely about Thanksgiving. And then my phone rang and it was my mother, and she said, "I need to ask you something and I need you to tell me the truth." I said, "Okay." "Gerald has been charged," she said. "Federally." I was quiet for a moment. "What?" I said. "Tax evasion. Wire fraud, I think. His lawyer called Carol this morning. They're saying it goes back years. The lake house. Some investment account." My mother's voice was very careful. "Sloan, was this Mom? I'm not accusing, I know." I took a breath. "No, this isn't mine." I took a breath. "No, this isn't mine. I don't work tax cases. That's IRS criminal investigation. It's a completely separate." "No, this wasn't me." There was a pause. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I believe you. I genuinely had nothing to do with it. I know you." Another pause. "It's just the timing." I wondered. I understood why she wondered. I would have wondered too. "Is he okay?" I asked. "He's furious," my mother said. "He's convinced someone reported him. He's been saying things about you." "What kind of things?" "That you did this. That you've always had it out for him. That whatever you do at work you used it to." "Sloan, he's telling people you engineered this." I sat with that for a moment. I thought about the Thanksgiving table, about help her find something to do, about good luck with the data entry, about the way he'd laughed and Victor had laughed and Becca's boyfriend had laughed and my grandmother had looked at her plate. That's not how any of this works, I said. I know. I don't have the authority or the interest to... I know, Sloan. I told him that. He didn't want to hear it. The part I didn't tell my mother. The part I haven't told anyone in my family. Not because I'm protecting a secret, but because I genuinely only processed it later. Sitting in my car in the parking garage under my building. Is this Gerald's attorney reached out to the IRS CI office handling his case. Standard procedure when charges come down. Defense attorneys make calls, try to understand scope. The IRS CI agent assigned to his case, a woman named Hendricks, based on the documents I've subsequently been allowed to see in a limited, unrelated context, apparently mentioned in that call that the referral on Gerald's case had originated 18 months ago. A routine financial review. Something flagged in an audit sweep. 18 months ago, I was deep in the Meridian case. My work, my records, my clearances. None of it touched Gerald. None of it. But 18 months ago, I also sat at Christmas dinner and watched Gerald pour 3 fingers of very good scotch for himself and 2 other men and say loudly to the room, "Got a great thing going on the investment side. Off the books. I mean, technically." He laughed. Everyone laughed. I thought he was joking. I didn't file a report. I didn't make a call. I didn't do anything at all. I don't know who did. I don't know if it was the accountant he mentioned, or the neighbor he'd argued with about the fence line, or just an algorithm that caught something in a sweep and put his name in a queue. I genuinely don't know. What I know is that it was not me. What I also know, and this is the part I've thought about more than I probably should, is that the week after Thanksgiving, I got a card in my building's mail slot. Plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a piece of paper with 2 words on it in small printed letters. Good work. I don't know who sent it. I don't work that way. My division doesn't work that way. I turned it over, looked at the back. Nothing. I kept it though. I don't know why I kept it. I put it in the drawer of my desk at home, under a folder of old utility bills, and every few months I take it out and look at it and put it back. Good work. The last time I saw Gerald was at my grandmother's 80th birthday in April. His legal situation was still unresolved, moving slowly the way these things do. Depositions and continuances and paperwork. He'd lost the lake house by then. Or was in the process of losing it. I didn't ask for details. He was quieter at that dinner. He poured regular wine. He sat at the far end of the table. He didn't tell any stories about clients. He didn't make any comments about my job. When my grandmother brought out the cake and everyone sang, he sang too, and he sounded tired in a way I'd never heard from him before. The lake house. The whistle. The jovial certainty that the room wanted to hear whatever he had to say. Some of it had gone out of him. I sat next to Nora. We talked about her college applications. She's thinking pre-law. She asked me, quietly, with the particular directness of a 17-year-old who has decided to ask a direct question, "Do you actually like your job?" I thought about it for a real moment. Not the polite moment, the real one. "Yeah," I said. "I really do." Even when... She made a vague gesture in Gerald's direction. "Even when," I said. She nodded like she was filing it away somewhere. Then she asked me if I thought she should apply early decision, and I told her what I actually thought, and we talked about that for a while, and the candles burned down, and outside it was starting to get dark in that early April way that feels almost like permission for something. I drove home in less than an hour. The traffic was light. I didn't think about the card again until I was unlocking my apartment door. Then I thought about it for about 30 seconds. Then I went inside, made tea, and opened my laptop to read a brief I'd been putting off since Thursday. There was work to do. There's always work to do. And I have always, even when it doesn't show, even when I'm sitting at the corner of a holiday table being quietly laughed at, been very good at my work. I've thought about Gerald a lot since that April dinner. Not with anger. The anger burned off a long time ago, somewhere on a dark highway between his laughter and my director's phone call. What I think about now is something quieter, something closer to pattern recognition, which I suppose is fitting given what I do for a living. Gerald didn't wake up one day and decide to be the person he became at that table. It accumulated. Every time he made a joke at someone else's expense and the room laughed, it confirmed something in him. Every time nobody pushed back, the habit deepened. He wasn't cruel in the way that requires intention. He was cruel in the way that requires nothing at all, which is almost harder to confront because there's no single moment you can point to and say, that's where it started. What I've come to understand is that the people who underestimate you quietly and consistently are usually doing something else at the same time. They're overestimating themselves. Gerald's certainty about what I was and wasn't capable of was always really a statement about him, about what he needed to believe to feel secure at the head of a table. The scotch, the lake house, the whistle around his neck at youth football. Those weren't just things he owned. They were the entire structure of how he understood his own worth. I don't say that to be unkind. I say it because it's the most useful thing I've learned from the whole experience. When someone dismisses you, look at what they're protecting. 9 times out of 10, it isn't about you at all. The harder lesson, the one I keep returning to, is about silence. I spent years being quiet at those tables, not because I was afraid, but because I told myself it wasn't worth the energy. And maybe that was partly right. But silence has a cost I didn't fully account for. Nora was 17 and watching. Every time I sat in that corner and said nothing, I was teaching her something too, whether I meant to or not. That some things you just absorb, that the smart move is to let it go. I don't think that's entirely true anymore. I think there's a difference between choosing not to fight and choosing not to be seen. I was doing both, and I called it strategy. What it actually was, at least part of the time, was easier. Showing up and being dismissed is painful in a specific way that's hard to explain, not dramatic, just wearing, like water on stone. And the path of least resistance was to make myself small enough that the friction stopped. The work, though. The work never let me be small. 18 months on one case. 7 people on my team who needed me to be precise and sure and present every single day. You can't be 2 things at once, the person who leads a meridian and the person who disappears into a corner at Thanksgiving because her uncle has a glass of scotch and an audience. Something has to give. What gave, eventually, was the part of me that thought being underestimated was something I had to manage rather than something I could simply let be wrong. Gerald was wrong. He was wrong for years, loudly, in front of people I loved, and the universe didn't need my help correcting it. It corrected on its own, through choices he made, through an audit sweep, through consequences that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with him. I kept that card, the one with 2 words. I still don't know who sent it, but I think I kept it not because it meant something about my work. It meant something about patience, about the particular kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, about the difference between the person who needs the room to know what they're worth and the person who simply knows. I'm still learning to be the second kind, but I'm learning.